Hello, this is Andy from Beastly Theories. Today we've got Denver Michaels, a good friend of mine. Denver's an author with a passion for cryptozoology and the paranormal, lost civilizations, and all things unexplained. At age 42, he released his first book, People Are Seeing Something, which I own actually. And that was a culmination of many years of research into the lake monster phenomenon. Since then, he's gone on to write Water Monsters South of the Border, Wild and Wonderful and Paranormal, West Virginia, and Detours into the Paranormal Atlantic City Road Trip. He works full-time as an engineering technologist, married with 3 children. So in his spare time, if he gets any, he enjoys the outdoors and traveling and continues to perform research and writing for future works. And here he is. Hi, Denver. How you doing?
How's it going, Andy?
It's going very, very good. It's a kind of wintry and wet day here in the UK today, so just like the summer, basically, no change.
Yeah, it's pretty cold here today. It warmed up a little bit, and then it got cold again. You know, real heavy winds, and the ground's all frozen. Just a nasty day out there.
Have you seen any snow?
Yeah, we had. We don't get a whole lot of snow where I am, but probably 2 feet a year is our average, but we got a little bit of snow about a week ago, and most of it melted. But as soon as it melted, it got real cold again.
Well, it's funny, the statutes and the things that people are used to. Here we have 2 feet of snow in the south of the UK. Anyway, it's like a national emergency. Nothing the trains don't work. We have half a foot. The trains don't work.
Yeah.
Anything stops those trains. In fact, and now. I've started this little podcast. It's basically chatting with colleagues, Beastly Theories, talking with researchers I like. It's complete nepotism from start to finish. Just people I like and I want to talk to and chat with and pick their brains. Now, I do have 2 of your books. I've got People Are Seeing Something, and I've got Water Monsters South of the Border, which I really, really enjoyed both of them. And I just thought we'd start with that, being well into lake monsters like you are as well, and really a crazy Nessie fanatic and all the affiliates. I just thought we could go over People Are Seeing Something. I was surprised to see just how many lake and sea monsters there are in North America. And now I know that we're familiar with Champ and Ogopogo and things like that all over the world, but I thought maybe you could tell us a little bit about the different types of unknown aquatic beasts in the book and where they are geographically.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing in the book. I think I might have covered, somewhere around 50, 60 creatures, give or take, over like 30 states and 6 provinces, and kind of just barely scratched the surface, to be honest with you, because there's like you can dig up, like old newspaper sightings and things of just like, in such and such a lake, somebody described this prehistoric creature, just kind of like one-off type sightings and stuff, that I didn't even put in the book. And, there's other creatures with histories too that, I just kind of like decided to cut the book off somewhere, after X amount.
You have to. You have to stop somewhere.
I didn't want to end up having, like a 900-page book or something that, people are like, oh, this is too much, but
it can just become a compendium sooner or later, can't it? You want to elucidate a few examples and move on, and otherwise it's just a reference, I suppose.
But I found like the bulk of the sightings, and like say if you want to use your typical, lake monster, your multi-humped, long-necked, serpentine, most of those seem to be, like in the northern United States and Canada, like in your, mostly like in your glacial type lakes,
like here.
Lakes that are, similar to Loch Ness and those type of places, and, like some of the lakes you hear in Russia, things like that, it just seems for whatever reason, those real deep, narrow lakes just, and what I can see seem to hold the bulk of the typical sightings. I mean, there's other types, and the same kind of holds true in South America. I mean, you don't really have a whole lot of your Nessie type sightings in South America, except when you get into Patagonia, Argentina and Chile, where they have those type of lakes too. So that's kind of interesting. Not really, I don't really know what it all means, but it is definitely a connection of some sort.
Yeah, that's strange. They like the cold.
Yeah, they like those cold, deep lakes, and it makes sense that that good deep water and things is it's good for I guess hiding out and stuff. But it also kind of makes me wonder if maybe like way back when the ice was melting and things like that, if like little colonies got kind of trapped, like here and there, and I don't know.
Would you say something that's interesting here is many of the loch and lake sightings have some river that's an outlet to the sea, whether it be very deep or moderately deep or shallow in some cases. And some of our water monsters have occasionally been seen moving through these rivers. Even with Loch Ness, you could get out to the sea either side. It's unlikely that you wouldn't be seen unless it was nighttime. It's completely black in the area. It's very pristine, very rural. Is that the same situation in the United States and Canada? Do you have a lot of river outlets to the sea, or most of the lake monsters or alleged lake monsters cut off there?
No, it seems that like a lot of them are like, and also there's the like a lot of the lakes and are connected to other lakes, via underground rivers and aquifers and that sort of thing, and that's always something that it comes up time and time again, is these rumors of like underwater cavern systems and things like that. And that makes a lot of sense to me, as far as, when people are, like scanning and things like that. And like, oh, well, we didn't find anything. But, if there's a network to, that you could, travel under these underwater caverns and things,
some
who knows?
People think that that they may have some sort of sonar ability themselves, and that they can hear it. They can detect the sonar signal, which would make sense. If you have a few boats traveling down a lake, let's say Loch Ness was difficult enough when they did Operation Deep Scan. I spoke to a chap that was involved in that. And he said, there were so many boats next to one another, we all had to set our sonar signal really low, because otherwise we would disrupt one another. Yeah. And on top of that, we couldn't go too close to the sides because it was too dangerous. People weren't experienced enough, and there were lots of little bays and things we just had to skip. And then he said, I'm sure that any aquatic beastie would have heard, if not the sonar signal, would have heard 35 boats coming down the loch.
Yeah,
and
yeah, but
had three contacts even with that, but still, it just seems to me that if it's an intelligent creature, it's going to kind of get away from something big and noisy coming towards it.
Yeah, and debunkers, they like to act like that that's the be all and end all. It's like, well, there's and then they tend to ignore when people do find things, anomalous things on like their fish finders and things like that, when they find something moving that's 20 feet long. They just dismiss that.
Floating log.
Floating log. It's
air trapped inside, and I love all of the water monster imposter ideas, because it's such a mental twist in some cases, especially with things like Nessie and other creatures that seem to have a neck that that comes out of the water several feet. I'm not aware of any particular water monster imposter that could really fulfill that role. Not a seal, not an eel. They can't do that. Not otters of any, not even the Amazon otter could appear to be of that size. So catfish, sturgeon, all the rest of it. I love these frail-brained, imaginative witness explanations that people give. There was one recently in Loch Ness, taken by a military historian. You've probably seen it. It looks like a very beaky kind of head. He said it was sticking 4 feet out of the water. Had a round rugby ball shaped head and kind of a beaky face, bit of a brow ridge. on it, maybe a frill at the back too. He described it pretty well. And I went to the location recently.
Mm-hmm.
I just then it's freezing. You would not wade out into that water, and there's a drop off. I can't imagine anybody else being there. There was no debris of any kind. It's deep in that part. I thought, well, that's not proof, but the kind of a diver with his hand up, a stick sticking out of the water, a bit of broken metalwork or docking of some kind. These are all plausible excuses. People do fake things, but I don't think there's a big reward for hucksters and hoaxers out there. You don't get famous. You get a little money from the paper for your picture, perhaps. And then from that point onwards, you just get harassment for your sighting. Nothing good happens to you, when you come out with one of these things.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, when it comes to water monster imposters, actually, is there something, some animal, for some of the sightings you think you would be satisfied with accepting? For not all of the sightings, but some, a plausible stand-in for some of these water monsters.
Well, I mean, like you said, there's a lot of different theories. A lot of things, could be or this or that. But I'm kind of always been, if I have to choose one, right? You put a gun to my head and you make me choose one. I kind of fall along, some type of prehistoric marine, reptile type thing, something like a plesiosaur or something like that. I'm kind of in that camp, and a lot of people, don't really like that idea, or very hostile to it. I've seen people in Facebook and Twitter comments get mad about it.
Really mad. Really mad.
And I'm not going to fist fight anybody over it. I don't care. We don't even know for a fact that these things exist for real. So I'm not going to waste a lot of time arguing with people. But that kind of, to me, because if you think about it, like you said, there are cases where seals have been mistaken for things, and manatees have and stuff like that. But like you said, with a long neck sticking out of the water 5 or 6 feet, now you could do what some people have done and propose the idea that there's an undiscovered species of long-necked seal. I mean, and that's fine. I mean, that, maybe, but I mean, that's just as much a stretch to me as thinking that something prehistoric survived, right?
This is where I am on it, though. So I think to propose that there is a 40-foot, possibly up to 40-foot long seal with a long neck living on in lochs, or undiscovered so far in lochs and lakes around the world, it's a bigger stretch than an extant population of prehistoric reptiles might have survived. We know we've got the coelacanth, the horseshoe crab, the crocodile is still with us.
Yeah,
these are all cousins from around about the same period, this geological period, and yet this, I think, it's a size matters type of issue. Sure, we can accept that this is coelacanth and some species of prehistoric trees have lived on to our modern era, but philosophically, I say a dinosaur, but I mean an aquatic reptile. It philosophically has so much more weight than those other things.
Yeah.
To find something like that, I think, would be troubling to some of the paradigms out there. At least as far as the scientists are concerned, it would give the creationists a big boost anyway, and then they think that they have the proof for their theory. And I actually, although I lean more towards that camp, I actually think that science would find some way to explain it. They would find some way to explain why it's still like the coelacanth. So it's 17 million years it's missing, and then it's there as a living creature, unchanged. That's quite extraordinary. So I think if they eventually find plesiosaurs living on in our lakes and seas, and accept that, have evidence of that, I think they'll just find a way to explain it.
Yeah.
They're here because of X or Y or Z.
Yeah, you're right, and that's something you brought up an interesting point about the creationists, and and I'm not, I don't fall in their camp of really the Earth being, 10,000 years old or whatever. But, for whatever you think about them, they've done some great research
They
in
really have.
cryptozoology. And
Yeah.
whatever you believe about what they think, there's no denying that they've, for many years, have kind of been on the forefront of, cryptozoology, like the lake monsters, the flying, the
Oh,
rope
yeah.
sort of
Yeah.
thing. Even Mokili and Bembe looking for living dinosaurs on and on in the jungles and things
Yeah.
like that. So, and there is that thing where where it not even just with cryptozoology, but you notice this too, like let's take like the crater impact theory that ended
Oh,
the
yeah.
last ice age.
Uh-huh.
To me, it's almost it's just always been settled in my mind. I don't know if it was a comet or something else, but
Uh-huh.
something cataclysmic, ended the
Yeah.
last ice age. That's how you get all the floods and stuff. But there's
Mhm.
so much pushback to that, and I think it's because they're afraid to give the creationists an inch. You know what I'm saying?
Well, it's a funny thing that a lot of materialists these days, uh, geologists, sorry, some of the lots of them have a sort of punctuated kind of catastrophism kind of theory to different points in time, or these big leaps of evolution that have taken place. I don't get involved in it too much. As I say, I fall more towards the religious side, but I've always kind of kept it out of my conversation about
Yeah.
cryptozoology and what I'm searching for, because it's polarizing,
Oh,
and
it's very.
immediately, you don't have the same colleagues, or you don't have the same chats, and we're all just really looking for animals. And with the creationist guys, the ones that are seriously out there just trying to prove something for their faith, I think that's fine. That's absolutely fine, as long as we get to share the evidence when they find
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
I don't mind what they do, and it shouldn't matter that their end game is something else if they still discover evidence of living creatures. Now, in your book, Water Monsters South of the Border, just gonna hold it up again. I noticed that there were some pictures of the Ica stones,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
and that was very interesting. Were those pictures you took yourself? Did you visit the area, or did you get those
No,
online? What do you know
I
about that study?
I actually got those pictures. Um, God, when was this? This was like almost 20 years ago. There's a creationist. I can't remember his website. Maybe Bible.ca or something like that. And anyway, his name is Don Patton.
I know who that
And
is.
okay, yeah, and about 20 years ago, I think he had a thing on his website like where he just had all these cool pictures
Yeah,
of, tracks and the Ica stones and, various other pottery and blankets with what looked to be, dinosaur like, motifs and things in
yeah.
them. And I think that like you could order, just like 8 by 11,
Oh,
photographs of all his pictures. It's like $5 or something. And then I just kind of, um, stuffed them away in one of my old file cabinets or something. When I was writing my book, I'm like, oh, I got those pictures, So I went and dug them out, and I'm like, wow. And so I
yeah,
emailed him, and I'm like, I'm not really coming at this from a Bible type thing,
yeah,
but would you mind if I, use your photographs? And I don't, I've mentioned in in my books when describing the lakes that, I kind of stick with the modern paradigm that,
yeah.
they're, a million years old, whatever.
Sure,
But I'm
sure.
just like, I would like to share your photographs because this is pretty cool, And he's like, yeah,
Evidence.
you've got my permission, share them
Yeah, yeah,
whenever, wherever you want. He just wanted to get the word out. So that's
yeah.
where I got those from. I've been to Peru, but I've not been to that, that part. I mean, there's a lot of places in Peru that I, did not get to go to when
I
I
mean,
was
my
there.
understanding was that they struggled for a long time to get into the museum archives to see those stones,
Mm.
those big boxes of stones. I've actually spoken with him once or twice. We almost met when I was going to Israel. So I often go to Israel for a coffee because he was on an archaeological dig there.
Okay.
He's an archaeologist as well, and we always, but he'd just come back as I was going, so I was hoping to get a coffee with him and discuss how he got into see the stones, what his thoughts were on them, and things like that. So it's kind of interesting, I'd love to have him on this actually, but I'm not sure if he'd be up for some little living room podcast.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was very, very interesting. That kind of stuff, South America. I know you have. There's quite a few famous. One wants to say now. There's that very famous picture of Nahuelito, which is in Lago Nahuelhuapi. Is that right?
Yeah, I don't know how to say it, but I could.
Yeah.
But yeah, in Argentina, yeah, down, way down in Argentina, yeah.
What do you think about those tales? I know there was a very explicit picture a couple of years ago that some people thought was doctored in some way, of a sort of a toothed reptilian kind of head lurching out of the water. Did you ever see that?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen several. I'm not real familiar with the one you're talking about exactly, and I have seen some photographs, but to me, I mean, I'm more. To me, the most impressive thing is just the witness report after witness report
Yeah,
after witness report. The photographs, that's all cool and everything, but
debatable.
yeah, it's so debatable, and even worse with videos, right? I
Yeah,
mean, a
yeah,
video could be anything sometimes, and that's kind of the catch-22 too, dealing with skeptics. It's like, okay, so there's all these sightings and nobody's got a picture. You show them a picture. Well, that don't prove anything. And then they'll just keep repeating that, oh, there's no pictures, there's no video. And then you show them something, oh,
yeah.
no, that don't mean anything.
It's a catch-22 for sure. Debatable, disputable. That's what I say. We were discussing. I was talking to Alexander Pedikov the other day, who did On the Trail of Champ,
Uh-huh.
and we're just saying, oftentimes it's worse if you have film or pictures and you're a witness,
Yeah.
because then they can tear that apart. Whereas if you just make a witness report that's reasonably credible and you've got a good reputation, it might be accepted that you saw something.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
if you've got a picture, watch out.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, you'd almost have to
Going
be
down.
crazy to, to show your picture, because then, everybody's gonna, scrutinize it to death, scrutinize you and everything. But
Yeah.
like you were saying in the lake in Argentina down there, I mean, there's just reports that go way back, and there's been all kinds of explanations for it, from, like you said, from hoaxes to submarines and submarine testing, that sort of thing. But there have been some really good, and what I think seem to be credible eyewitness reports that they're just like the ones you hear out of from Champ and
Uh-huh.
the Ogopogo, the
So
Loch Ness
it's like a
monster.
Nessie-like creature, or is it more of
Yeah,
a
yeah.
serpentine Ogopogo type of animal?
It's it sounds I mean, it's got the nickname the Patagonian plesiosaur.
Oh,
It's
okay.
one
So
of the
that's pretty
nicknames that it kind
correct.
of goes by. So. Yeah, so
That's
I mean,
amazing.
who knows?
Oh, so I understand there's not just Nessie-like animals or serpent-like animals around the place. You just finally on this little subject here, you write about the some very large turtles sometimes, and you also write about something called the Oklahoma octopus. Oh,
Yeah.
what's that?
Well, the Oklahoma octopus, and this is one that I think is just kind of folklore, or kind of almost kind of just something that got some traction on the internet, and it just kind of took off on its own. But
Sounds
but
cool.
it
It's got a good ring to it. Actually, I'm not
yeah,
surprised.
well, that was one of those things when I first heard about it. I'm like, wait a minute, an octopus in Oklahoma. It's like, this is cool, but the more I got digging into it, just a quick background on it. So there's
Uh-huh.
like 3 lakes in Oklahoma, and they're all man-made lakes, but
Uh-huh.
they're very large lakes. But when you get to the man-made lakes, I always get kind of skeptical that there could be a water monster in there. But I mean, I guess there could. But anyway. It's like in the early 2000s. There are several reports of drownings and things like that in these lakes, and like something was like pulling people under. And so these kind of took off, and you'd hear about people describing like a freshwater octopus, like red, leathery with tentacles and things. But
this is
I
in
don't
the
know.
early noughties, early 2000s.
This was the early 2000 or mid to late 2000s, I should
Okay,
say. Mid to
yeah,
late 2000s. But if you do you remember a show called The Lost Tapes on Animal Planet? I
yes,
don't know if
yeah,
y'all
I
got
remember.
that over there.
Yeah,
But anyway, that was kind of a cool show, but it was, it was entertainment. It would
yeah,
take like a cryptid report or whatever,
yeah.
and do all this dramatized stuff. So there was like like maybe like that much truth in them. And at the beginning of the show, it says that you know this is all
Yeah.
dramatized and everything. But
I do remember one or two episodes,
yeah, well,
definitely.
they did an Oklahoma octopus episode, and so researching this thing, like you couldn't find anything like from like print sources, newspaper, anything
Yeah.
like that. Everything was just on the internet, and it was just the
Okay.
same things repeated over and over.
Forums and
And
things.
do what now?
Forums, chat rooms and
Oh yeah,
forums and things.
things like
Yeah.
that, and like a couple websites with some articles, but it's all the same thing. It's like it's always you know several teenagers. One of them drowns. One of them goes to the hospital, but then they got the sucker marks all over
Okay.
them from like an octopus and things like that. And I was reading an article on one of the cryptozoology websites. I think fella Zachary Mann may have written it, and he
Okay.
he pointed to a Stephen King short story called The Raft. And so
Uh-huh.
I read that. I
Yeah.
watched the Lost Tapes episode,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's like the same thing almost.
Well, as you're telling me the story, I'm thinking of the raft,
Yeah.
actually.
So it's
Yeah.
Raft. It was like an ooze or whatever in the water that
It
consumed
was
people.
televised as well, I think, on I think Tales from the Crypt might have done it, or
Okay.
one of those
Okay.
guys in the 80s,
Yeah. Yeah.
a long
Okay.
time back.
But
But that
so
kind of a black ooze.
yeah. So long story short, I think the Lost Tapes episode pretty much ripped off the Stephen King short story and just
Uh,
put like an octopus instead of the ooze or whatever that was in the
yeah.
water, and like everything that you find as far as sightings and stuff like
Yeah.
on the internet go, it's all exactly from the Lost Tapes episode,
Oh, okay.
names and everything. So
Okay.
I mean, it was like just kind of a cool story that kind of
Yeah.
died because you would
And not
hear.
to say there's not a kernel of truth in it.
Yeah,
It has to come from somewhere originally.
yeah. I mean, in the drownings, there could have been like, like large catfish, or I'm not opposed to the idea of like giant catfish in those big lakes. Even like
Well,
80,
yeah.
100 pounds that
Do
could
you
grab.
do you have wells? Do you have wells catfish
We
over
don't
there?
have wells, but we have like those big blue cat, like in the deep south. They have those big
Okay.
blue cats, and they get up over 80, 80 pounds
Like
sometimes. I
five,
mean, they're
six
just
feet, six,
they've
seven
got like
feet, maybe.
yeah, they got like heads like that
Wow.
big. Yeah, I mean,
And how about I wrote once about giant turtle sightings. Um, what was that about? I didn't find it in the book again, and I missed it. But I'm sure you did a blog about some very large turtle sightings, and that's always fascinated me. I know that's a big theme in very East Asian countries.
hmm
But it's also mixed up with their mythology and religious imagery as well. What do you know about that?
Well, that's kind of another one of those things that you don't really know, like where the truth ends and folklore takes over. You know what I'm saying? And the
Yeah.
lines get kind of blurred. But there was a lake that I wrote about in my book. There was a lake in Indiana, and this was the late 40s, maybe like 1949. And there's this giant turtle. People were reporting seeing a turtle the shell was like the size of the top of a car, is
Wow.
what they're reporting. And, it's kind of a long story, but anyway, the farmer, whose land this was on, um, he reported it to newspapers, and he was going to drain the lake, to prove that this thing was in there, because it was only it was a small lake, like 7-9 acres, something like that. Nothing too big. I mean, still a big undertaking to drain.
Yeah, sure.
But anyway, it got the attention of local media and even people from, media from across the country. And, supposedly there were like thousands of people, out there to document this, this turtle thing. And, long story short, he's trying to drain the lake. He spends all summer working on this, so he doesn't harvest his crops or anything. And he gets like close, but his pumps break and he's out of money, and it's just story over. I think he ended up going bankrupt from all this, and it's just kind of sad. Because he didn't harvest his crops or anything like that, going after this turtle. And then
the turtle mania.
Yeah, and the story kind of ended there, but they have the turtle's name was Oscar, and they called it the Beast of Busco,
that's right,
Indiana or something, and they do like a festival each year to this day, like in honor of that turtle in that story. But so I don't know. I mean, it's hard to tell, but I mean, if a guy, puts his livelihood on the line to prove this thing exists, I mean, he at least thought there was a massive turtle in there.
There's another aspect to that as well. I think when you go back 50, 60 years, or even 30 or 40, before the internet, before things could be disseminated worldwide, the tales are going to be sparse in supporting sources.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you could say these days the supporting sources are, thousands of retweets and, retellings and paper coverage of the story. But that is usually, like you said again with the Lost Tales thing, usually based upon one or two accounts. So who's to say he didn't see it? I don't think it invalidates it at all. My thing I'm wondering about turtles, and most reptiles grow for their entire lives, don't they? How big could, say, a snapping turtle or something grow if it lived a very, very long time? Or you hear of animals when they're infertile, male animals sometimes gaining a very massive size. I'm not sure if that affects turtles, by the way, but could that be an answer to some of these things? Tortoises and turtles just living for a very, very long time in optimum conditions with no predators. And then, maybe not as big as the roof of a car, but let's say the size of a sofa.
Yeah.
And that's still pretty huge.
That's still a big turtle, man. Yeah, I mean, when I've been fishing, I've just accidentally caught these big snapping turtles, like this, like that, big around, and that's not even anything compared to what these people are talking about. But you see their shells start coming out of the water. It's like, oh my God, look how and then they got heads like that big around, and I can't imagine seeing something like they're talking about. But those stories exist, and even in some lakes in New Mexico, the bottomless lakes. I was out there in 2017. My son and I went out there on the outskirts of Roswell. There's a series of lakes, and they're really just sea notes are just like filled in sinkholes, and they're really deep. Some of them get up to like 90 feet deep, but there have always been reports there, a lot of strange reports, but from there were people that have claimed, and these are kind of sparse report. You don't see a lot of documented stuff. It's more just kind of like word of mouth and a few things here and there, but of these turtles there that are the size of a Volkswagen,
Wow.
I don't know how true it is, and being out there, it was kind of hard to really imagine that that something like that was living in there, but who knows, man?
It's strange. Even if you reduce an exaggeration by 20%,
It's
still a
still pretty
pretty
damn
big
big.
animal. It's strange, all of these things. I saw one of those River Monsters episodes with Jeremy Wade, and he was fishing for Wells catfish in a dam in Spain, where it'd been well stocked with fish, this whole dam, and people had put the Wells catfish in there 20, 30 years ago to fish for them. And they're catching 9 and 10 footers in there. They're huge animals because the water is warm. There's masses and masses of food, and it's a catch release program in the dam, so nobody keeps the fish. There's just tons and tons of food in there.
Wow.
And these wells were bigger than any of the world's catfish that they were fighting. So optimum conditions, without predators, with a great food source. Who's to say an animal that can live 100 years like a turtle can get very, very big?
Yeah, I think so too.
Now, I would talk about our aquatic crypto friends for hours and hours if you let me. But there's another aspect that you're very into, which is the paranormal. Now, I know very, very little about that, but you wrote 2 books, Wild and Wonderful and Paranormal West Virginia, and Detours into the Paranormal Atlantic City Road Trip. So for someone like me who knows very little about the paranormal genre, what do you consider to be paranormal? And is there a particular area that you're interested in, or is it just one huge minefield of different sort of ghosts and ghouls and poltergeists and hauntings and things like that?
Yeah, I guess more like minefield. I'm just kind of pretty much anything unexplained. I just like to research, investigate as much as I can, and write about. I just I love cryptozoology, but there are times when you don't know the lines, or at least for me, the lines get kind of blurred. Like let's take something like the Mothman. Okay, where does cryptid end and something more supernatural begin with a creature like that? You know what I'm saying? And even, I'll tell you, I mean, even and a lot of people don't like to hear this either, but even with Bigfoot, there are a lot of instances where it almost sounds like something supernatural or whatever is going on, and that's not popular with a lot of folks, and but it just when like I'll give you an example, like not too far from where I live, maybe 20 miles down the road. Now I live in a fairly rural area, but there's a lot of subdivisions, and maybe 30 miles away there, or 30 minutes away, there's a lot of protected national forests, things like that. So, you would expect, a lot of your cryptid reports there and stuff. But there was one that somebody was telling me about, and it was in a park that's about, maybe 100 or 200 acres of land. So, you could have something there, but you would think that if there would be just like a whole lot of sightings, you know what I mean? But somebody was telling me about a Bigfoot. She said it was definitely not a bear. It was like a Bigfoot, but it was light in color, and all she could describe was these huge red eyes. So, I mean, now I can do all these, mental gymnastics and try to figure out how something's got these huge glowing, like LED light, red eyes, or I could say, well, you're not telling the truth. I could just say, well, I don't know what it is, but maybe it's not something natural.
It's something that comes up a lot, and you say there are some mental gymnastics, and of course some attributes that would have to be applied to it. That if it is an ape, that we wouldn't apply to other apes. So somebody said to me that it has some form of bioluminescence, that it can create its own light within its eyes. So I thought, well, that's very interesting, but that's a big biological thing we're talking about here.
Yeah.
That's not known in other apes. And I know the Mothman and the Owlman here is reported in the same way. I don't think we've had any Bigfoot sightings where the eyes are said to have self-illuminated, so to speak, or glowed in any way. but I have heard of them,
Yeah,
worldwide. That this thing does seem to happen with no other light source
exactly. And
other
yeah,
than the
so it's
animal
not like a
itself.
flashlight hitting it, it's
Mm,
just like glowing red eyes. So, and that's just one example, and that's just kind of something I point out that, with a lot of these things, I'm kind of open to the paranormal, whether they're interdimensional ghosts,
yeah,
whatever. I don't know. I don't really get into a whole lot of that. I just notice that there are, some weird things that some cryptids kind of accompany. So that's kind of why I leave the paranormal door open with a lot of
sure,
things.
sure, and I
But
think that's
also,
reasonable.
if I circle back to lake monsters, that's kind of why I love lake monsters so
Mm,
much. That's one of the one things that I don't even have the paranormal in my mind at all,
uh-huh.
because I think there's just enough sightings, there's enough water, there's enough
Yeah,
things we know, enough plausibility that we can say, yeah, this is definitely a flesh and blood animal here,
yeah. But there are lots of theories, especially up at Loch Ness, um, where the people have proposed all kinds of identities, paranormal identities, for this type of thing. And you know what, I think this whole study of cryptozoology, it does have a lean into the paranormal. And I think it's because it's a denominational belief system. So
Yeah,
it requires some belief because there's not enough evidence, and therefore, wherever the person is personally coming from, sometimes, or whatever they lean most towards, religion or science or paranormal or other, seems to provide the explanation they're looking for when
yeah,
describing the sighting. Of course, there's some sightings that defy all explanation, regardless of
right,
what you think it should be.
yeah,
But it's interesting. When I did the conferences in the US this year, what I was very astounded by with the store holders was there were horror comic people, there were psychics, there were ghost hunters, there were Bigfoot people, lake monster guys. They were all there together, and I thought, well, isn't that strange? Obviously, the same people like to buy all these different things.
yeah,
It's the same genre. A big eye opener for me. Anyway,
yeah.
um, just briefly, the next sort of 5 minutes or so before we go, I'm very excited to find out that you're writing about giants. And I know you
No,
said that you're sort of reconsidering just taking a small time out with it at the moment, but obviously, it's a big subject. We spoke before when I visited the tomb of Og of Bashan in the
yeah,
Golan Heights, who features in the Bible as a 15-foot tall giant, remnant of the giants in the north of Israel, um, back in biblical days. Now, what type of stories have you been researching, and what kind of geographical areas are you covering in that book?
well, for the most part, I kind of, North America is really, North, especially like the Ohio Valley, that area, and moving westward a little bit is a real hotbed. But the book is kind of divided up into several parts, and
Uh-huh.
like in the first part, I like to cover the giant myths
Mm.
and legends across the world, So I've got a chapter dealing with, some of the Native American stories, into like Greek mythology, blah, 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 and South American stories,
Mm.
stories from, Mesoamerica and that sort of thing. And then in the other part of the book, I chronicle some of the actual historical encounters with giants. When some of the early European explorers came over here, like Hernando de Soto. Talking about these giant native people that stood, a foot and a half taller than the Spanish, and and the chiefs were even bigger. Like
Wow.
Chief Tuscaloosa. He was supposedly so big that he couldn't even ride their horses. They had to put him on a pack horse, and his feet drug the ground. And
Wow.
his son was the same size. Those things where it's like, where you can see that, at least, early on in in the Americas that there might have still been, a remnant of very large statured people. And so I kind of break it down like that. And then at the end of the book, I'm going to discuss some theories and things like that. It's one of those things. I've been working on it for a few years.
Yeah.
I was working on it real hard last year, and kind of took a break. I've got about 75,000 words, and I need to really finish it. I need another 15, and I'm just kind of took a break from it for a while, and
you don't want to force it out.
Yeah,
I suppose,
exactly.
as well.
And I've always got like 2 or 3 things I'm working on at the same time. So
I know that. I know that feeling.
Yeah.
I do. I think it's an exciting area though, because
you too.
Well, it's just there's so much in our history now. Of course, here, Britain, Albion, as it used to be called, was reputed to be a land of giants.
Yeah.
When it was settled. And of course, in South America, I always think of the Patagonia, like you mentioned, the Patagons, the big feet. So named. Now, the Spanish aren't a big people. That's one plausible excuse for thinking the natives were giants. But I still don't think, we're talking about small people they're describing here. They're clearly 7 foot and above, by the sounds of it. And why not? We have giants today. We have people who are gigantic today. They have growth issues sometimes, like the what is that called? Begins with an M. Yes, I'll put that.
I know what you're talking about.
Yes, with the pituitary gland when it has a tumor. But then you also have people who are of giant size. Now, I knew a guy, Sam. He was 7 foot tall, but he was a giant. So even though he was just 7 feet, he was proportionately giant.
Yeah.
Across, he was just a huge person, and that's how he grew. And look at the Maasai, 6 foot average for women. And that's they're tall people. And in old times when gene pools were more restricted, because you stay within your tribe, within your state, within your town, your village, or your part of the country or the world, I think it's very likely that people could have become big, in a tribal sense, or small when you hear of little people, very, very small.
Yeah.
In the same sense, you probably noticed when you met the Peruvian people that they're not a huge people themselves. When you were in Peru at that time.
Yeah, especially up in the mountains, up in the Andes. Most of those people were pretty short, and but in the jungle area, they were a lot taller. It's kind of strange.
That makes sense. I would imagine there's a big deprivation of oxygen at those heights.
Yeah, and I guess they have a lot bigger lungs, than we do, and walking around in those altitudes and things. It's it's just like more. So some of the guys were kind of like had more barrel chested.
Really? Very wide across the chest.
Yeah,
that's interesting. It's very interesting. Yeah. I'm not an altitude person, Denver. Don't do altitude.
Yeah, it's up in the Andes. Some of those towns, you're just in Cusco, I think it's like 11,500 feet thereabouts. So just walking around takes a little bit of getting used to, man. And
do you find that your blood pressure is affected at all by that kind of altitude, or is it more to do?
I've always done okay with it. I'll get the little shortness of breath, when I'm walking around, and like in the mornings, I'd wake up just with a pounding headache every morning. Really? I guess because you're just sleeping all night. And you're not breathing the oxygen that you're used to. But for the most part, I did okay. And even here in the States, places I've hiked at high altitudes, 8,800, 9,000 feet, things like that. I've done okay with, but I've heard that people though that do okay with it, like they might go back another time, then all of a sudden get altitude.
Really? It can just hit you.
That's what I've heard. It's never happened to me.
Yeah.
knock on wood, it doesn't. But
Maybe the knocking on wood is the reason it's not happening. Just to finish up, like, I really enjoyed this, and it's so good. As I say, I love the books. I've read them a couple of times, and for a while now, but I've seen it a few times, and it's a good reference point for me when I'm thinking about this subject and when I'm writing, and what else is out there for corroboration. Often referencing them. For people who are interested in you now, where can they find you? How can they support your work? And are you talking anywhere? Is there anywhere they can go and see you and get a signed copy or hear you speak?
Well, I've not done any conferences or anything to this point, but if people want to look me up, go to denvermichaels.net. I've got a blog. I usually write a couple blog posts a week, and you can find all my books on Amazon or wherever you buy books.
And I've seen you've got a few YouTube videos too.
Yeah, I've got a YouTube channel too. It's fairly new, and I've not really promoted it a whole lot, but I do. I'll do like almost like little supplements to my blog. I might have a blog post, and then I might, kind of put that to video about a particular cryptid or something like that. And then sometimes when I'm out in the field or whatever, I might shoot a little cheesy video if anybody wants to watch it.
I do that myself. There was one I was hiking up into the hills there over the loch recently.
Yeah, I remember that.
I watched
it on Facebook, I think.
I had to add huffing and puffing added for dramatic effect, but really I'm just out of shape. I'm in my 40s, so I just okay. You're gonna walk it, you're all by yourself, and that's fine. But it's gonna be on camera, so you gotta give some explanation.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna sign up. But listen, thank you so much for doing the show. I'll put all your links up, and it's just been great talking to you. Thanks so much.
Well, it's good talking to you, Andy. I appreciate it.
Thank you, buddy. Bye-bye.
All right, bye.